The mission. Geraldine was tall and fair. You couldn't be able to tell she was half Suquamish. Her mother was from the Seattle area. Her father was a former soldier who fell in love with a native. Geraldine lived in San Francisco. A good Christian, she dedicated herself to charitable works. Many people, in her mind and according to her religion, needed saving. Reports came from California. The church was looking for missionaries. The reports said that natives and Mexicans needed converting from their miserable lives. Looking to quell the suffering, Geraldine, along with the other parishioners, took on the cause. Once arriving by train, the first thing that Geraldine noticed was the hot, dusty weather. The heavy layers of clothes that protected her from the misty, cold air of the Northern California coast would have to be reduced to her undergarments. She fashioned a dress out of thin white linen. Her neckline went up to her chin, tied with a thin piece of black velvet trim. They assigned her and the other parishioners the task of creating stakeouts. Someone would eventually provide them with funds to buy building supplies to build casitas. These casitas eventually became homesteads. On those homesteads grew avocados. During the season, that was all they ate. Life on the homesteads was dull. Geraldine wondered where all the natives and Mexicans were. They were nowhere to be found. She looked around the desert in 360 degrees and found no one that needed saving. No one needed her ministering. Geraldine was without a job. She kept her long, light brown hair bleached by the sun up and in a tight top bun. The bun was how she kept her hair clean when the dust flew by on the scorching desert wind. She developed a tan that brought out her Suquamish features. There wasn't much to do besides daily chores. Geraldine got water from the well, swept, and cleaned. She entertained herself by picking succulents, cacti, and other desert plants like sage bushes and grew them within the barriers of her homestead. She shared the homestead with another family whose number of children was growing faster than the rooms available. The homestead was constant work, growing with the demands of a growing family. Children, chickens, goats, and pigs kept life entertaining. But the experience underwhelmed Geraldine. She was passionate about helping people learn about God and saving them from the temptations of the devil. Geraldine cared more about the ideas people thought than banal conversation. There was no actual mission to save the spiritually starved natives and Indians in the area. The indigenous tribes didn't need Western spirituality or economy. They were doing just fine on their own. After 2 years, Geraldine realized the homesteads were merely a ploy for businessmen to build a market for their goods. After all, settlers will need lumber, furniture, roads, and more. There is a great market for city building. And government leaders, she surmised, benefited from having missionaries build these cities as it expanded the American territory ever more. It pushed the non-Americans out and further away. Jaded by the financial and political motivations, Geraldine felt beside herself. Nobody really cared about the mission. Ignorance and the audacity of religious leaders sent hapless parishioners out on a fool's errand. Life was harder. Work never ended. Geraldine asked herself what was there to gain from this hopeless cause. On a trip to Old Town to buy rugs and textiles for the homestead, Geraldine experienced the most action since leaving San Francisco. The market was a busy exchange of natives, Mexicans, and Americans buying, selling, and trading goods. Prisoners sat in the holding pen outside of the courthouse. Women sold loaves of bread under propped-up tents that shaded them from the sweltering summer heat. Children played unsupervised. The sights and sounds were intoxicating and overwhelming. There were women dressed in fine clothes. The laundry women laundered their fresh clothing. Tightly positioned hats covered their perfectly coiffed hair. It seemed these women hadn't seen the sun in ages, and Geraldine wondered how their clothes stayed so neat and clean in San Diego's arid, dusty, windy heat. She noticed the haciendas where these women lived out their days. Protected by the heat and wind, it was sure these women lived like fine, caged birds, their every need met and provided for by their wealthy husbands. Geraldine turned her head away from the elegant homes that surrounded the market. She walked back to her friends waiting in the wagon. As the family loaded up their wagon to head back to the homestead, Geraldine asked for a few more moments to buy a warm piece of bread from the Mexican ladies. Standing next to her as she waited for her food was a tall, dark Indian man. He wore brown leathers and a cowboy hat. He appeared intimidating but disarming at the same time. He stood patiently, but with purpose, under the tent beside her. She felt weak by his very presence. She went to pay for her loaf, but the lady refused her money. She pointed to the dark man beside her and brightly smiled. Geraldine tried to explain in English that they weren't traveling together, but the man handed the bread lady money and walked away. Geraldine blushed. She had never met a man like this before. She didn't know what else to do besides mumble a thank you. She walked towards her friends. The man was walking towards them, too. She didn't know what would happen next. Her friend in the wagon introduced the man to Geraldine. He was a trader from a nearby tribe. He sold items from the tribe's community and brought back items they needed. Geraldine could barely breathe. She felt light because of the electric connection between them. It seemed like everyone in and around the wagon noticed it too. The two men shook hands, and everyone parted ways. Geraldine looked back to the Indian man. He was talking with other traders in a booth on the street. Leaning on a wagon, he looked back at her, flashed his eyes, and tipped his hat. Geraldine turned around. She blushed. She knew that whatever she was experiencing was just the beginning. Weeks went by. Geraldine lived mostly in her thoughts. She went about those days idly doing her chores, barely engaging in any deep or meaningful conversation. She walked through her days in a sort of daze. The children that surrounded her asked her to pay attention to them, but she feigned interest in anything other than wondering the answer to the question that repeated itself in her mind. That question was, will I ever see him again? Geraldine wanted to know everything about this mysterious man. She wanted to know his culture, his thoughts, his beliefs, his history, and his family. Her curiosity welled inside of her. She could hardly contain it until the perfect moment arrived. A group of wagons arrived at the homestead. The children, chickens, and goats migrated towards the wagons. All were in eager anticipation of discovering who was driving them and what was in them. Geraldine was not expecting wagoners. The family were expecting orders of tents to house their growing children during the winter months. It seemed the family developed a rapport with the Indians and found there was nothing to convert besides converting their money into much-needed supplies. Everyone joined the wagoners in unloading the wagons. Geraldine lifted the tarp of the second wagon. A familiar face popped up. Geraldine jumped back. She felt like she had seen a ghost. It was him. She thought of him so much that it was as if he appeared out of thin air. She gasped. He laughed. "You scared me," she said breathlessly. He spoke almost no English. "Hello," he said. The wagoners stayed for 3 days, during which Geraldine watched him from a distance. She helped serve dinner to him and the other 2 guests, an older husband and wife. She listened to their attempts to communicate with the family. Even the kids had questions and observations. Geraldine had so many questions for this man, but she didn't know where to start. She wondered if he had a family, a wife, or children, or if he was as free as the wind. On the morning of the 3rd day, her friend, the mistress of the homestead, asked Geraldine's opinion of the stunning man. With all of her thoughts swirling around her, she couldn't muster out more than a flustered smile. Immediately, her friend understood. At lunch, before the wagoners headed home after the break of the midday heat, the mistress asked her guests if it was okay for Geraldine to come along with them to visit their tribe. She explained Geraldine came to preach to the natives of the area about God and had had little opportunity to do that. She positioned the suggestion as a cultural exchange rather than a conversion of lost souls. Everyone looked at the elders. The woman nodded. She agreed to be responsible for Geraldine during her visit. How long Geraldine stayed would be up to her. They would bring her back when she felt she was ready. And so, that evening, Geraldine took a trunk of her belongings, kissed all the children, hugged their parents, and went with her hosts. She thanked the mistress for opening the door to this ministry opportunity. What Geraldine really meant was, "Thank you for introducing me to this man." And off they rode with their backs against the sunset. Geraldine left the family and the homestead months ago. Geraldine felt she left behind the shadow of who she used to be. In fact, Geraldine had no intention of returning to that person, nor the homestead. Life with the tribe changed everything about Geraldine, her thoughts, her attitudes, and her perspective on life. Geraldine even left behind her clothes and adapted to the native life. In the Western way, people feel that there is someone they need to answer to, some authority. With the tribe, she noticed people turn to each other to find solutions and get answers. Yes, there were elders, but it didn't seem like an authoritarian regime where women and inexperienced men needed to prove themselves just to get help, attention, and love. Their farming system was more of a cultivating system. Nothing seemed separate or broken off from each other. Everything in nature seemed to operate in a complex, coexistent way. Instead of fighting off pests and lack of water, the tribe worked with the conditions and even expected them. Harmony and intuition seemed to be the mode of living. While the tribe cooperated peacefully, they were under no guise. They knew that the world outside of them was in turmoil. The Mexicans and Americans had political battles. They knew of the droughts and sufferings of the farmers who were used to the plentiful rain of the Pacific Northwest. They were aware of the harm that the white man had caused himself, and the battles of the neighboring tribes who sensed the insecurity and aggression of the inundating whites. She learned the elders taught the tribe to not resist the progress of the people, but not to fall into their traps either. Idle gossip, fear-mongering, reports of suffering from right and left. They would move where spirit would move them. Their logic was that as they arrived from another world, they would leave to another world. Indeed, their fundamental beliefs shifted everything inside of Geraldine. She felt at peace for the first time in her life, rather than constantly wondering what's next. Geraldine thought she was going to fall in love with a mysterious, long-haired man, only to have an unknown future between two worlds, the native and the white man's. Rather, she fell in love with the people. This man represented everything about their beliefs and attitudes towards the world. Simply put into a singular word, beautiful. It took some time for Geraldine to open up to this man. She was so eager to get to know him, but she had never felt so inept in her entire life. At first, she spent time with the women and children getting to know them and learning their domestic ways. But as the community integrated Geraldine into their lives, something finally filled the divide of unspoken tension between her and the man who captured her curiosity. He didn't have a family of his own. He had a mother and a father. The woman who brought her to the tribe, his aunt, introduced Geraldine to everyone as a white woman curious about their ways. They didn't know that Geraldine, too, was half native. Geraldine came to meet and understand those around her. She learned this tribe was a blend of tribes throughout the western United States. Some family members came as far as Wyoming. The cultural heritage ran deep and focused more on the spiritual unity of the tribal members rather than ownership or ties to landholdings. This man had a name, Araho, Areheo. It means bringer of the light inside you. The story of his birth was that the elders prophesied him as the bringer of the light in people. The tribe believed that in every person exists a light that shines until the light flutters away and leaves the lamp, which is the body. Araho's family believed that he would bring out the soul's light so that its soul could do its job on earth until it left. The outside world saw him as a traitor, but his tribe saw him as much more. Whenever someone in the tribe experienced darkness in their life, Araho encouraged the hesitant soul to shine brighter, to come out and stop hiding from life. Some Westerners would call this type of person a medicine man, but Araho didn't work with tinctures or salves. Rather, he talked directly to the soul. Geraldine did not find it hard to transform her biblical views of salvation into a broader, more universal understanding of God's nature. To her, the same God who lived in her was the light that existed in every tribal person. She kept her Bible in her trunk and turned to it often, but she knew that the truth in between the covers of her Bible was busy and at work before her. Geraldine fell into a deep state of love for Araho. The yearning tension between them developed into a warm, embering affection. She realized that this tough, powerful man was a deep feeler and intuitor. He made every decision not upon the conditions of the day, but from a more authoritative source that existed within him. Members of the tribe took a day trip to a nearby river. Off of the river were streams covered by a canopy of trees. These trees broke the heat and provided a cool breeze, which allowed the men, women, and children to splash and play. Geraldine wore her linen dress for the occasion. She wanted to feel romantic. She put her hot feet into the stream. She watched the water bugs dance on the surface of the water in the shade. While staring into the stream, she saw a reflection in the water coming from someone standing behind her. It was Araho. Everyone around them disappeared. The only thing she could hear was the deafening sound of cicadas. She stood up and leaned against a tree. From the distance, one could see Araho gently kiss Geraldine on the right cheek, barely missing her lips. At that moment, Geraldine thanked herself for embarking on her mission. For she knew with his kiss, her mission reached its completion.